Hey, this is Christian Roldan.
And Jordan Morris from the Seattle Sounders Football Club.
And you're listening to
This is Nos Odietis.
This episode of Nos Odietis is sponsored by Full Pull Wines, a Seattle-based wine retailer and proud sponsor of Nos Odietis since 2011. Full Pull was founded in 2009, is based in Seattle, and is owned and operated by longtime Sounders supporters. They offer the best boutique wines of the world to members of their mailing list, with special focus on their home, the Pacific Northwest.
Here we go. Come on! Hey, O'Shan! Let's go!
A sideline fry! The Seattle Sounders have done it! MLS Cup winners!
Here comes Ray Gibbs through the middle to crown it for Seattle! And now they truly can start the celebrations. It's the Sounders MLS Cup.
Nico Ladero leaves absolutely no doubt! The Sounders rule the region!
Seattle Sounders is going good!
They've scored! They've scored! Finally!
This feels fucking awesome.
This is a tiny dog.
Is that what you young people call twerking?
That podcast says cheated!
You want to win? This is the Seattle Sounders, bro.
Welcome back to another episode of Nos Odietis, sponsored by Full Pull Wines and Watson's Counter. Just a reminder, we are doing a viewing party on Saturday for the game against Dallas at Watson's Counter. Tickets are $10. I think there might still be a few left. If you want to come down, come on down. But joining me to preview that game is Drew Epperley of Big D Soccer, who recently moved to Substack, one of my former SB Nation colleagues. Welcome to the show, Drew.
Hey, welcome. Thank you.
So, first of all, let's just get this out of the way. How have things been with the transition? Has it been an okay sort of landing for you post SB Nation?
Yeah, it's been honestly a really good transition for me personally. I've had more energy this season covering this team, being more independent and being more on my own than I ever have. I mean, it kind of takes me back to my early blogging days, I guess.
Yeah.
Where, I'm doing it myself, and if I don't do it, it doesn't happen and nothing grows. So it's been good overall. And the support I've gotten this season has been phenomenal too.
Was the West Virginia hooligan days? Right?
Yeah, back in the day, I still own that domain. It does absolutely nothing, but sends money to GoDaddy once a year, I guess. But it's got other hosts, underneath it, so it's not like it's doing nothing and wasting money. But it's still out there in the void. But it's still my Twitter handle and Instagram handle. Although I don't really do Twitter anymore, so I can't really say it's too much there. But it's still, I get used out of it on Instagram, that name.
Good. Well, I'm happy to hear that. So looking forward to this game. Obviously, the big piece of news coming out this week was Alan Velasco's injury. We had all sort of assumed and sort of it had been kind of like even Nico Estevez had sort of suggested that the injury happened on that sort of incident where Alex Roldan kind of fell into him. But it turns out it was like 15 minutes earlier than that where he went into a tackle and sort of landed awkwardly. What do you know? What can you tell us about the Velasco injury and what it sort of means for Dallas and how they might overcome that?
Yeah, I mean, it was one of those things like I'm with you guys. I thought it was that collision with Roldan. And even in that moment, that collision, I was like, okay, something's not quite right here. Like it just didn't look, things just seemed a little bit, it kind of, to be perfectly frank, it took me back to the day that Mauro Diaz picked up a similar injury against the Sounders, but it was a non-playoff game. It was, a regular season game towards the end of that magical 2016 run that they were on. But yeah, it's not a great thing. I mean, he was lucky, I think, to walk off on his own power, which surprised me when it turned out that it was an ACL tear. But Nico told, the press yesterday that, it's a pretty rough tear. It's going to take has to do a little bit of, some kind of pre-surgery work to clean his knee up before they can actually do the surgery. So they're working on that right now. He didn't really go into detail what that meant. But I'm guessing it has to do with some swelling and just that kind of fluid that's usually surrounding those ligaments and whatnot when those kind of injuries pop up. But yeah, it's a long road ahead for him. I mean, it's a good 9-10 months from what Nico said, which is just it's terrible. I mean, you hate to see that for anybody, especially a young guy like Alan. I mean, he's here by himself. I mean, he's got some family around, but he's still a young kid. He's 21, 22. So he's got to kind of grow up fast through all this, if you will. But they've built a really good support system around him that I think will help guide him through it. And Nico was saying too yesterday that he's like Alan's already asking like, okay, what do I have to do here? What do I have to do there to get myself into a better situation to where I can recover quicker, to where I can get stronger quicker. So the kid's competitive, which is great. So my gut tells me we might see him back sooner if he really works hard at it, like I think he will. But yeah, it's a tough loss for the team.
Yeah. So I saw one report that suggested that Bernard Kamungo could effectively replace him. That would presumably mean a formation change as well, though, right?
Yeah, I think it's a formation change if they're going to bring Bernie back in. I mean, he said Bernie's good to go. His ankle's fine. He didn't want to play him on the turf on Monday night. He just didn't see that working out well for him.
Sure.
Which is to be fair, that's totally understandable. Bernie's a young kid that you don't want to further aggravate an injury anymore.
Sure, especially when you have room for error.
Exactly. And then to me, I kind of think he won't start him, but I could be totally wrong in thinking this way. But I think he brings back Sebastian Lletget into the lineup because he's healthy again. He's good to go. He said that he's been training full for a good week now, which is a good indication in my mind that we could see him there, which makes more sense in that 4-3-3 that he likes to play. So he could have Lletget and Pomykal kind of in the middle up top with Iramendi right behind them, and then continue to have the wings of Areola and Obrian with Jesus Ferrer up top. But I mean, he could also he could put Bernie in over Obrian. I mean, those are kind of a like for like in my mind in terms of the lineup. It's just a matter of the training these today and yesterday. Who really shines more than the other.
Yeah, well, focusing a little bit on Lletget, he came to Dallas last year, and there was some expectation that he would be, a potential difference maker for them. It hasn't really panned out. He has just one goal during the 2 seasons. He obviously battled some injury this year. From your perspective, what's going on with him?
Yeah, this has been a weird year for him. I know some of it has to do with off the field stuff. They won't talk about that. They keep a lot of that internal, which is totally fair. But yeah, the injuries on the field have really derailed this season for him. I'm trying to remember the number off the top of my head. I saw it earlier the day when I was doing some game note stuff, but he's missed, I think, 11 games maybe this year at this point.
Well, yeah, he's only played in 19 of 35 games essentially.
Yeah, I mean it's been a rough year, and it's like every time he got healthy again, something popped up.
Yeah, and it looks like he missed 4 stretches of games this year.
Yeah. I mean, and that's been really the theme, not just for him, but for the entire team this season. Just a lot of guys going in and out of injuries. I think the chart now is like 83 games of players with injuries, games missed, which is just the fact that they made the playoffs with that kind of number to starters alone, not to mention got the 7th seed and avoided that wild card round. Like that's impressive in my mind. Like that teams don't do that in this league.
Yeah, I think I one of the notes I saw in the notes package, which I guess was just from the regular season, they used 33 different lineups in the 34 games. I assume the lineup they used against the Sounders was also a new lineup. So that would be 34 lineups in 35 games. But yeah, the Sounders have dealt with injuries, but it seems like Dallas's injury situation is considerably worse. Velasco is the 3rd player they've lost to a knee injury this year.
Yeah. I mean, the first one was in preseason, a homegrown Tarek Scott. I mean, he hadn't even played a professional minute. He got signed over the winter last year. A lot of promise with that kid out of the academy. The poor guy, in training, I think we were in Spain is when it happened. Tore an ACL, out for the whole year. Then Giovanni Jesus, 2 months ago, just a terrible timing. He was about to be called up to the Brazil U23 side for the
Jeez.
Pan Am Games. So, I mean, just devastating timing all around. So yeah, it's funny, it's just one of those things. I mean, I've seen it in years past where a team like this just they can't seem to get over the hump injury wise. When it's ironic when you look at last year, they rarely had injuries to deal with, and so it's like the exact opposite between Nico's 2 years here.
Interesting. So what is the sort of the mood going into this game? Is it, I know Estevez talked about like, well, let's rally around Velasco's injury and sort of do something special on his behalf. And on some degree, that's what you got to say, right? You can't allow yourself to get into this "woe is me," uh, mindset. But what's from your perspective? What is the, what's the perspective that the team is coming into this game with?
Yeah, after Monday, you got to think they're just a little bit gutted. I mean, they'll say all the right things, they'll present all the right motions and stuff in training, but it kind of reminded me of just how things ended before the decision day game in LA. Like they just looked gutted after a couple home draws to teams that they really had no business drawing. And they should have easily beaten some teams like Colorado and San Jose to seal those playoff spots much sooner. But that vibe felt very similar. And just hearing Nico Stevis talk, he will tell you he's the eternal optimist, which I totally love and respect about the guy because I'm kind of the same way. But you can tell like his tone of voice in talking about his optimism is different depending on the weeks he's talking about it. Like going into this week, you can tell like after the first game loss, it's like, well, it happened. The injury happened. We blew some chances. We have to be better. But, I still feel like we can do it. And so he's got that rally cry, which is, pretty admirable. And I think if they get a good boisterous home crowd behind them, anything's really possible with this group because they seem to really respond well when the crowd is like just really making some noise behind them. I go back to that Miami game in Leagues Cup. That was as loud as I've heard it in that stadium. Obviously, because of a certain dude from Argentina playing in the game, but outside of Messi doing what he was doing in that game, the Dallas crowd really was rallying around the Dallas team, which I was a little bit leery of going into that match that it would actually be that case. But you could see the momentum just shift every time, like Velasco, especially when he was playing in that one, or Kamongo when he was, scoring a goal, or Jesus when he was setting up a play. Like the crowd responded well, and I think if that kind of crowd is there Saturday night, anything's possible for this group. I mean, they don't seem to be the type of team that is going to be beaten down too much because they don't tend to, at least this season, tend to lose a lot of games in a row, just because they have that strong defense and they tend to buckle up things pretty nicely from game to game.
Watson's Counter wants to thank everyone for their patience, but now the wait is over. Located at 6420 24th Avenue Northwest in Ballard, they've reopened in a brand new location with the same bomb-ass coffee and the same dumbass vibes. You can still expect their classics like the gochujang fried chicken sandwich and Fruity Pebbles French toast, alongside their new soft serve program and their world-class coffee. Make sure to follow them on Instagram for all the latest and greatest.
Yeah, I mean, it's a team that does not lose a lot of games. I mean, that is a pretty straightforward way of putting it. I think they came into the first leg on a 9-game unbeaten streak. Granted, only 2 wins, but they're competitive in almost every game they play. And you look at their home record, and that's especially true at home. They only have 3 home losses this year. You can go back to basically midway through last year, and they only have 3 losses in their last 24 regular season home games. So this is a team that, at the very least, knows how to keep from losing at home. Does it feel like there's a real home field advantage? Because they, on the flip side of that, is that they don't win necessarily a ton of games. There's a lot of ties in this stretch.
A whole lot of ties. I mean, the last 2 months, I think we were talking after that San Jose draw. No, it was after the Colorado draw. So that was the a makeup game before the LA game, and it was me and one of the team media people that's been there for a few years, and we both were kind of like, "Have you seen this before?" And we're both like, "No, this is just weird." Like a team that they're not losing, but they're clearly not winning at the same time. So it's a weird dynamic there. Um, I do think though that the LA game was a good break for them to kind of get out of that funk. And then obviously Monday was what Monday was for Dallas. But I think coming back home, there's a lot of motivation out of this group. Everything I've seen in the last couple of days is they seem motivated. The fact that they have a home playoff game, and they also know in the back of their heads this is likely the last home playoff game of this year.
Right.
They would
Even
need,
if they win, it would obviously go back to Seattle, and if they win that one, they'd probably be on the road for, well, unless they play Kansas City, I guess, which doesn't seem completely out of the
I know,
possibility.
I know. And even playing Kansas City, like they could get that one if that were to happen. Which I mean, who knows at this point? But even like an MLS Cup, they would need the entire East bracket to be completely flipped on its head for that one to happen.
Right.
So I think in the back of their heads, they know like this is a very important game, and they have to take complete control of this game from the start. If not, their season's done.
Well, I would imagine that you see this as a distinct possibility as well, but it feels, especially given the history between these two teams, like a tie heading to shootout at least feels well within the range of possibilities. What is the feeling around shootouts in Dallas? I know the Sounders in Dallas did actually have a shootout in 2015, which you probably remember very well.
Yes.
Dallas won that shootout after an absolutely wild finish in Dallas to the second leg of that one. But what is the is Martin Paz considered a shootout, a penalty stopper, or are there a bunch of penalty experts on this team?
I would say on the Martin Paz side, I'll start there first. I feel like there's an amazing amount of confidence with that guy.
Okay.
Going into the goal. Like I go back to I think it was the Kansas City game earlier this year. He had to stop 2 straight penalties in a row. One got called for like an offside or something on I forget. I think he might have like jumped too early on the first shot that he saved, and then Kansas City switched kick takers. He steps up, saves another one. So there's a lot of confidence with him, I think. And even, that penalty on Monday night, he got a hand on it. Like,
Right. Yeah, he
that
definitely
wasn't
did.
very far from a save on his part. And so I believe like there's good confidence there. And, in the Leagues Cup, he did fairly well against Miami. He didn't play, I don't believe, against Charlotte. And that Charlotte loss was just a terrible one in the shootout. Like Dallas, this kind of goes into the next side of on the kick takers. I don't think there's a lot of confidence in this group when it comes to kick taking, mainly because the last 2 seasons in the regular season, they've only had 1 penalty kick. So just from experience alone, there's just not a lot there to lean on. And then in Leagues Cup, they had 2 opportunities. They lost both of them. They were better in the Miami one than they were in the Charlotte loss, but still, it's a loss at the end of the day, which I know that's in the back of a lot of people's minds going into this. If it does go to a shootout, you feel good about Jesus Ferreira. You feel pretty good about maybe Paul Arriola. Outside of that, you're kind of going, okay, who has that confidence on this team? Maybe Nkosi Tafari might step up. I wouldn't be surprised if he did, because that guy's got just tons of confidence about him, the way he plays.
Yeah.
But down the roster, you're kind of like, well, that guy should do it, but he skied one against Charlotte, and that guy should do one, but he missed, wide right, and then, it's just you kind of go through the list, and you're like, well, I just don't know at this point if this is the group you want out there. But I'm with you. I wouldn't be surprised, especially with this one, if it were to go that distance. I still find it weird that they'll go straight to penalties.
It is very strange. I think that's definitely one of the, I think the jury is very much out on this best of 3 series, but the thing that still kills me is the idea that a team could lose 1 game in regulation and then 2 win 2 shootouts in advance. And that just feel like, and I will say the one benefit is, at least the sense I get, is that no one wants to play for penalties.
Right.
Because they all because everyone recognizes how much is on the line, and that at best it's a coin flip, and that's only if you don't, if you have Tim Malia, maybe you have a different perspective. But like for every other goalkeeper or every other team, I feel like, look, we would rather take care of business in regulation than chance penalties. And so I guess maybe that's the one good side. But man, it is absolutely horrifying to think about a series like this being decided in without even overtime.
Yeah. It feels like, just based on, if you pull in history alone between these two teams, it feels like that's where it'll likely go. Like when I looked at the playoff bracket from day one, I thought, okay, we're going probably 3. 2 of these probably are going to go to penalty kicks. And it's probably going to be frustrating no matter how it ends up for either side. Like, it's just not going to be pretty. So.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I'd say there's a decent chance of that. For what it's worth, on the other side, the Sounders, I think there's a lot of consternation about Stephen Fry. He's faced something like 80 penalties when you add up all the shootouts he's been involved in over the years. And he only has, like 5 or 6 saves in all of those. So there's not a lot of confidence in Stephen Fry as a penalty stopping goalkeeper. But on the flip side, there's a ton of confidence in their shooters. There's probably 5 or 6 guys who have been either the primary penalty takers at one point or another in their career, or have shown themselves to be pretty good in shootouts. Jordan Morris, for instance, has stepped up and taken a few penalties in shootouts, and he's been absolute nails. So they probably have, they feel pretty good about their shooting roster. I just think there's a lot of consternation about the guy who's in goal to stop him. For as good as Stephen Fry has been, stopping penalties is not one of his fortes.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like the exact opposite here.
Right.
We're good about our keeper. You're not good about your keeper, but you're good about yours, and we're not good about ours. So, I mean, I feel like that really just tracks between these two teams, especially in the playoffs. Like, one's going to outshine the other, but the other is going to have something that's going to outshine the other side. And, I think that's what makes the playoffs special in MLS, especially with matchups like this. I know the format's always different, but I feel like the matchup when we get Dallas and Seattle is always worth tuning into.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. And it's amazing how often these two teams meet. This is obviously the 6th time in less than, I think, in 9 years that the Sounders and Dallas have met in the playoffs. Every one of these meetings has been competitive. They've always been exciting. So, I don't expect this to be an easy one either way tonight, or tomorrow, I should say.
Yeah, at least I will say the weather will be beautiful here.
Yes.
Had it been last week, I wouldn't have been saying that. But
what was the weather like last week? Was it just
we've had a cold spell. I think we were last Saturday. It was highs in the 50s, but all week we've been like highs in the 30s or not highs, lows in the 30s, highs in the upper 40s. But
okay.
Tomorrow's looking great. I think the high is like 70. So it'll be a perfect fall evening here.
Love to hear that.
One of our few weeks of the year that actually feel like fall in Dallas.
Yeah, that is one thing that a few Sounders folks have pointed out, that they would much rather be playing in Dallas in November than in July, for instance.
Oh, yeah. Believe me, when July and August and even part of September are here, I'm ready for any other time of the year because it's just miserable.
Yeah, I bet. Well, Drew, thank you so much for joining us on the podcast. You can read Drew at bigdsoccer.substack.com. Is that right? Or is there no Substack in there?
I mean, you can put Substack, it'll redirect, but
okay, but it doesn't. So it's just bigdsoccer.com.
Yeah.
But it is on the Substack platform.
It is, yes.
Yeah. And then where else can people find you?
You can find me on, I guess if you want to say X, I still call it Twitter.
Oh, of course. We definitely are Twitter. We are definitely calling it Twitter here.
I feel like that's like a generational thing at this point. It's going to be like,
maybe
in my time, I called it that. But yeah, you can find me on Twitter. Big D Soccer's for the Big D Soccer stuff. I still occasionally tweet on my WV Hooligan one. But yeah, you can also find me on Instagram. I'll throw some lovely coffee photos or beer photos in my stories. That's about it these days.
Fair enough. Well, Drew, thanks again for doing this. Looking forward to the game tomorrow, 6:00 on Apple TV. I am Jeremiah Shan, signing off for Nos Audietis. We will catch you next time.
We love you. Let's win another one.